Pesticides are currently under the spotlight as concerns grow over their role in recent cases of food poisoning and even fatalities. Now, these toxic chemicals, often linked to both pesticide poisoning and contamination in our food supply, are actually raising a lot of alarms about the need for stricter controls as well as safe alternatives. Today, we look into the devastating impact of these substances as well as the urgent call for action to protect public health. To tell us more on this, let's welcome Cara McKay, Campaigns Coordinator at the Women on Farms Project, as well as Anna Chevelle from Unpoison SA Network Coordinator. Ladies, great having you with us. Thank you so much for being with us. Season's greetings. Anna, let's first get your opinion on the current concerns that dangerous pesticides are easily accessible in this country. And maybe let's also look at the root causes, as well as what could be the most common causes of pesticide poisoning here in South Africa.
Thank you. So I think that one of the main problems is a lack of regulatory enforcement. We do acknowledge and commend the department for bringing out stronger regulations in 2023, and again, they're busy being updated now. And with those regulations, there were regulations on restricted pesticides that came out. However, the regulations on restricted pesticides have not yet been implemented in the pesticide supply chain adequately. So turbophosph, which is the most hazardous class of pesticide, should be very strictly managed. And we have heard many authorities and Minister Steenhuisen come out and say that all kinds of very strict measures have been taken in the supply chain with turbophosph, but actually it hasn't been implemented. Those measures have not been implemented in the supply chain. The correct labeling, we don't know how it's been managed in the distribution networks. And turbophosph, which is this very, very deadly poison, has managed to leak into the township economy and into the township trading sector, and essentially provide chemical warfare easily accessible to households, especially because there's such a high pest problem. So essentially, it's a lack of regulatory enforcement and compliance, but also a lag. The regulations are there. There's been a very serious delay in actually implementing those regulations along the supply chain. And it's the view of Unpoison and many other organizations that these pesticide poisonings could have been prevented if there had been a ban on highly hazardous pesticides and if the regulations were actually implemented and enforced in time to prevent this.
You're absolutely right, Anna. I mean, that was just going to be my follow-up question to this, because the issue of regulation and how enforcement mechanisms actually fall short of the required standards in this country is actually something that is shocking, and it just goes across board. We do have all this legislation and regulations, but we do not have the necessary means and people who will go and uphold this law. So, Cara, in your experience as well as your view and information that you have, what do you think then are the core challenges when sounding the alarm on the potential dangers of these pesticides, and just how widespread is the issue, especially at farm level?
Good question. I just want to draw attention back to the fact that it's been 2 months now since the 6 children have died. And I read an article, and the one mother was saying in the article, if you only knew how my child died. He vomited, he was dizzy, he was convulsing, he was shaking. And he looked up at his mother and he said, "Mommy, I don't want to die." And he's 6. "Mommy, I don't want to die." So that's 2 months now, and the chemical that poisoned him is supposed to be restricted for agricultural purpose. Yet, as Anna mentioned, has made its way into the domestic economy, it's made its way into households, because people are so desperate to control the pest in their world that they would use these chemicals. And it's important to remember that why do we do this work? We do this work for those 6 children that have passed. And I just want to draw your attention to Minister Steenhuisen's comment that said that we as NGOs shouldn't stand on a soapbox and preach, basically, and insist upon this immediate demand. But I think that's a misrepresentation of why we do the work. We're not here to soapbox, we're not here to preach. We're here for those 6 children that have passed. We're here for all the other farm workers and the other farm workers' children that have passed, and we're here to make sure it doesn't happen again. So from my side, the central blockage at the moment is almost our government, especially in the form of agriculture with these comments. There's a block to working with us. There's a block to coming to understand the issues on the table, to doing the best. So if 6 children die, doesn't that at least force you to comment and force you and say to the turbifos companies, okay, something's definitely wrong. Let's pause the production of this until we see where the leaks or the gaps are, whether they're coming from the SADC regions or not. There's definitely a problem. Let's at least stop. It's not business as usual. Let's change the way we operate. Yet we just don't see that coming from agriculture. And agriculture registers these pesticides. They are the first stop. Once only they can ban the pesticides, only they can register the pesticides. So for me, the big problem is at the very first point, and if we want to stop turbifos and other highly hazardous pesticides from poisoning more people, we have to begin with agriculture, the registrar, and the registration process around these pesticides.
You make very compelling points there, Kara, because the president had actually associated the contamination or the need for the use of these pesticides to filth as well as uncollected refuse at municipal level, blaming municipalities for not going out and ensuring that their areas are safe. So, Anna, with all these loopholes then for the few to bypass the system, let's talk about accountability. Who should then be held accountable when safety standards are clearly violated? Producers, retailers, or regulatory bodies? And then Kara will respond afterwards.
So I think who definitely shouldn't be held accountable is spaza shop owners. And as we've said previously, the scapegoating of spaza shop owners, and especially immigrant spaza shop owners, I think is just absolutely devastating, and I think highly, highly irresponsible when we are not seeing any penalties upstream of the supply chain where the tap, we need to turn the tap off where it's coming from. Mm-hmm. And we do know that industry has had or the industry says, and Dalrod says that there have been guidelines shared with industry about how to manage these pesticides, but the same guidelines have not been shared with spaza shop owners. And now we're seeing this very dramatic clampdown on spaza shops. Reportedly, 540 spaza shops have been closed in Gauteng alone. We're seeing horrific xenophobic attacks and people being deported and goods confiscated and everything closed. So I really believe that the efforts of government and authorities, especially now in clamping down on thousands and thousands of spaza shops, that is a massive amount of resources and time that you want to regulate the people right at the bottom, the last link in the supply chain, when you could go right to the very source of distribution. And why has there not been 21 days and a time limit to go and audit the distributors and the sales where the problem actually occurs? Now, industry says that, and the minister says that the turbifos that poisoned the children or found in spaza shops is not industry's turbifos. Mm-hmm. But the Department of Agriculture hasn't even finished their investigations. So I'm not sure where that is coming and whose laboratories that is coming from. We don't have conclusive evidence. What we do know is that turbifos has been banned by most other SADC countries long before South Africa, the last ban being Botswana coming at the end of this year. So how is it really that turbifos is coming in through other SADC countries? I think it's the other way around, possibly, because South Africa actually exports to a lot of the SADC, or has exported to our neighbours. So just in terms of the pesticide poisonings, I think it's also very important for the public to be aware that there's a big difference between pesticide poisonings and food poisoning. Food poisoning is a bacterial or microbial problem because of contaminated food that might be not in hygienic conditions or past its sell-by. But pesticide poisoning is a chemical poisoning from pesticides and poisons. And they are two very different issues that have now been confused into one, which makes it very convenient also for authorities or for industry to now deflect accountability and responsibility.
Kara?
In terms of accountability, I would agree with Anna. It's first and foremost, it's the Department of Agriculture's responsibility. They register the pesticides. They hold the keys to shutting off the tap, as she refers to. But what we also see is this fragmentation, especially as you go to farms. So if there's a pesticide poisoning, an incident, the exposure on farms, then when we ask the Department of Agriculture to support us with this, the exposure, they'll say, no, that's the Department of Labor's department. They are the ones that have to manage the pesticide. So after the pesticide is registered, then it becomes Department of Labor's responsibility. And it's really important to realize that the farm workers of South Africa are handling highly hazardous pesticides that have been banned in the EU years ago, and they're handling these substances without training, without information. In many cases, they don't get safety protocols, they don't get PPE, no gloves, no mask, nothing. They must go in with overalls, cotton overalls, and they must work. The farm workers can't tell you what is being sprayed at farms. They don't get given that information, and the people spraying are too scared even to give that information. There is not always soap and water on these farms. So if I come and I work for the day, I've got nothing to wash my hands. So if I eat my food, I'm going to poison myself automatically. And in the worst case scenarios, there's no toilets in the vineyards. To this day, it's 2024 and there's still no toilets in those vineyards. So women, when they come to work, they have to squat in the vineyards, and that increases the possibility of exposure. So many women will tell you, when you get to work, you have to bring your own scarf, a cotton scarf, and that's how you protect yourself. People have to buy rain overalls with their own pay, with their own money, to protect themselves. In most cases, the tractor will drive by and will be spraying, and people say they just have to turn their backs on the tractor. And so they are being exposed to highly hazardous pesticides with no protection. And then once you get sick from pesticides, then it's catastrophic for families. Medically you become unfit to work. You lose hours of work. Sometimes you lose employment. And when you lose employment on a farm, you lose the right to live on the farm. So people get evicted. So not only are you sick, not only do you get no health care no support from the farmer, but you're now also evicted. So the impact of these things are vast, and it's a big deal that government, especially agriculture, refuses to even engage with the call for the demand.
Kara, we are going to try and get, some sort of feedback or engagement from the Department of Agriculture pertaining to this matter. So, ladies, moving forward and looking at some of the solutions, where can we then all assist, especially from a public awareness perspective, from government level to communities? And also, how can consumers identify and try to avoid these unsafe foods? Anna, we'll start with you.
I think instead of penalizing the spaza shops, there should be grants, small business development grants, education. The township economy should be boosted rather than penalized. And going forward, I think that we definitely need to fast track banning highly hazardous pesticides, especially the pesticides that are coming out in the mortuary data and the studies are showing that they are posing a significant risk. There are a number of pesticides, not just phosphorus, that are responsible for poisonings. And the 2010 policy of pesticide management says that if there are pesticides that show that they are unmanageable, and I would say that deaths in the townships prove that they are unmanageable, then we need to look at phasing them out and banning them. So we need to not only look reactively when there's a disaster like this, we actually need to forecast and say which are the next pesticides that will be a problem, because if we do ban turbophos, well, something else will be used. And if there are not highly hazardous pesticides available on the market, and if we can introduce the other really important solution is a fast tracking of biological input registrations. So currently we don't have significant biological inputs at the moment because there are problems just with registrations. And the problem is twofold. We need to ban highly hazardous pesticides that are posing a threat, and we need to fast track the availability of low risk and non-toxic solutions for agriculture.
Ladies, unfortunately, I'm out of time, but thank you so much for your input. That was Cara McKay, the campaigns coordinator at the Women on Farms project, alongside Ms. Anna Chevelle from Unpoison SA. She's the network coordinator.